economics A-level and a succession of economics degrees at each juncture, I was also taught that a recession is 2 successive quarters of negative growth. 6 months, if you like, of economic contraction. And that's what's happened in the US. In the first 3 months of the year, the US economy shrank by 1.6% compared to the first 3 months of 2021. And in the second quarter, we just learnt yesterday evening our time that the US shrunk by another 0.9%. Now, that is a technical recession. Whatever Joe Biden says, pretty much the only argument he's got, because he doesn't want the recession headlines, I think, in fact, by having this row about use of word is we're talking about it more, right? But he could say, and his advisors, so-called, do say, oh, but unemployment's low. It doesn't really feel like a recession. We didn't think we were going to be in recession. Look, maybe it's because the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates sharply. Yesterday, the markets were responding, digesting to another 0.75 percentage points, a 0.75% increase in the Federal Reserve basic rate. That's the US central bank. They've now raised rates 1.5% in 2 months. That's very, very aggressive, tackling inflation.
Still very low in historic standards.
Yeah, it is. It is. Interest rates are still very low by historic standards. And I think that Fed interest rate increase will be followed by the Bank of England next Thursday, perhaps with a 0.5% or even 0.75% increase. But look, in the round, this doesn't really make any sense what Joe Biden's doing. This is one of the ultimate examples, it seems to me, of political spin doctors thinking they can wish away economic reality. You and I, we often talk about economics and politics and how they link together. We're both intensely interested in each other's areas of expertise, if you like. But we all know that there are certain economic facts on the ground. And if you deny them, no amount of sophistry and spin doctoring and PR is going to rub out the fact that the US economy has just shrunk.
And I wonder if Joe Biden had not been trying to claim his country wasn't in recession, would we be having such an in-depth conversation about it today?
We wouldn't.
But classically, there is this mantra that where the US goes, the UK follows.
Yeah.
Are we now in line for a recession as well?
Uncle Sam sneezes, we all catch a cold. It is still the world's biggest economy. You know, it's still, Brexit or no Brexit, it's a fifth of British trade. It's our biggest single country trading partner easily. And that's not going to change any time soon. And also the US financial markets set the tone, right? And the financial markets, stocks and shares, they do drive where big investment decisions go outside of the stock markets, and that drives growth.
Fascinatingly, the US is not having the same energy crisis that we are in the UK,
right.
or indeed the Europeans are in Europe. The US is not being impacted by these Russian sanctions. They don't import much gas from Russia at all. They export gas. So are we in for something even worse?
I wouldn't suggest we're in for something even worse. And the US, while, of course, you're right, it is now an energy exporter. That's a relatively new phenomenon. It has been developing shale gas fields, but it's still on the planet and it's still subject to global prices, and global energy prices are high, and US consumers are feeling those global energy prices, even if certain parts of US industry are benefiting from those high energy prices because they're producing some of the oil and gas. Don't say to US motorists as we sort of go into the Thanksgiving driving season this autumn the Labor Day driving season this autumn, that gas that they put in their car, petrol as we call it, isn't expensive, because it is
relatively more expensive, even though the level might be
because it is expensive.
Yeah.
But in the UK, it's not all doom and gloom. We mustn't talk ourselves into a recession. There are some good economic things going on. Investments holding up. There's still, financial markets are holding up, even though for many of us, for many GBNews viewers and listeners, for many people across the country, even, relatively well-off people, from vulnerable households right through to the squeezed middle, life is going to get a lot tougher. How far we are, Tom, from the V-shaped bounce-back recovery that was meant to follow the COVID pandemic.
Now, just finally in this conversation, there is a Conservative leadership contest going on, of course. 2 different visions about how the economy is going to be managed, at least in the short term. Tax cut Liz Truss versus steady as she goes Rishi Sunak. Which vision, in your mind, is most likely to avoid a recession in the near term?
I think in the near term, the vision that's most likely to avoid a recession is to implement some tax cuts, or for the most part, Liz Truss is saying, I'm just not going to increase taxes the way Rishi wants to. He's already, legislated for a corporation tax increase next year from 19 to 25%. Right. Well, I'm not here to endorse any particular candidate, but it does strike me, all other things being equal, that's not going to help growth, And if you run a family kebab shop, you pay corporation tax. If you're a plumber with a van and a couple of mates who work with you, you pay corporation tax. This isn't just big business. I think Liz Truss should have finessed it and said, OK, you pay a bit more corporation tax if you're a big company, because a lot of big companies are making out, doing well in this inflationary environment. They got power. They can push prices up. They can squeeze the prices they pay for stuff from their suppliers. But I would have put a threshold so it's the smaller companies that aren't paying that corporation tax increase. It's smaller companies that get hammered during inflation because they can't pass on the price rises to customers because they're in a very competitive market, and they have to absorb the price rises from their suppliers because they're not very big purchasers, unlike the big companies. So it's the small companies that get squeezed, and it's those small companies that are often run by swing voters. If Liz Truss, in my view, with all respect to her and her team, have been really smart, I'm going to freeze that corporation tax increase up to a threshold of £250,000, £500,000 turnover a year. Then she couldn't have been accused of looking after her big business mates.